It was a quiet Sunday afternoon at Greenfield Park. The usual sounds of laughter, sizzling grills, and children playing filled the air, creating the perfect picture of peace. Families had set up picnic blankets, some tossing frisbees, others enjoying the warmth of the sun. It was the kind of day where nothing seemed out of place, until the sirens shattered it. The first patrol car arrived fast, skidding to a stop near the park entrance. Then another, and another. In under a minute, the area was crawling with officers, their vehicles boxing in one particular section of the park. By the time the last car arrived, forming a barricade, an uneasy silence had fallen over the park-goers. Conversations stopped. Parents clutched their children closer. A group of teenagers filming a TikTok paused, their phones slowly lowering as they watched, wide-eyed. The officers stepped out in perfect unison, hands resting on their holsters. Their eyes locked onto one family sitting under the shade of a massive oak tree, a black family. It was the only one in the area. A man in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, sat at the center of the group. He wore a fitted black tactical jacket over a dark turtleneck, his piercing brown eyes unreadable. Beside him, a woman in her early 20s leaned back in her chair, her arms folded, watching the officers without a hint of fear. Two young men, also in their early 20s, exchanged glances. One of them sighed as if this was nothing new. The other smirked, shaking his head. The lead officer, a hardened man in his late 40s, tightened his grip on his firearm. "Hands where we can see them. Now." The father didn't flinch. "Is there a reason for this?" His voice was smooth, unbothered. "We received a call," the officer barked. "Suspicious individuals, possible weapons." A slow, unimpressed blink. The father looked down at the picnic table where plates of food sat untouched. "And you think we're the threat here?" "I'm not going to repeat myself," the officer snapped. "Step away from the table, all of you." The young woman scoffed. "Oh, this is gonna be good." The lead officer's patience was running thin. He turned to his partner. "Cuff 'em!" That's when the first crack in their confidence appeared. The second in command hesitated. He squinted at the older man, his eyes narrowing in recognition. "Wait a minute," he muttered. But the lead officer wasn't listening. He stormed forward, pulling out his handcuffs, reaching for the father's arm. And in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The father didn't move. He didn't resist. But the way he looked at the officer, the sheer weight of his gaze, sent a ripple of doubt through the ranks. Then he spoke. "Before you take another step, I strongly suggest you run my name." It was not a request. The lead officer scoffed, ready to argue, but his second-in-command was already typing into the in-car computer. The moment the results popped up, his fingers froze. His breath hitched. The color drained from his face. "Oh my God," he whispered. One by one, the officers checked their radios, their expressions shifting from aggression to horror. The younger officers began exchanging panicked looks. A few took unconscious steps backward. The lead officer, still oblivious, growled, "What the hell is going on?" Silence. No one answered. The father leaned forward slightly, his lips curled into the faintest smirk. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." Then, a radio transmission cut through the tension. "All units, stand down immediately. I repeat, stand down." Too late. The damage had already been done. The lead officer's eyes darted between his men, his frustration turning to confusion. "Somebody tell me what's happening." A slow clap echoed through the park. One of the young men, tall, sharp-jawed, with an athletic build, stood up, amusement flickering in his gaze. "This is rich," he said. "Really, I mean it. You guys couldn't have picked a worse family to mess with." "Shut up," the lead officer snapped. But his voice lacked its former authority. because he was beginning to understand that something was very, very wrong. His radio buzzed again. This time the voice was urgent. "Confirm visual. Is it him?" Another officer gulped. "Yes, sir." A long, waited pause. Then the radio crackled back. "Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage." Too late. The older man finally stood, dusting off his jacket. He tilted his head slightly, studying the officers with something between amusement and disappointment. "So, none of you recognized me?" The lead officer swallowed hard. Who are you?" The smirk deepened. "The real question is," the father said, "who do you work for?" The air went still. Something shifted in the officer's demeanor. Not just fear, not just regret, but something deeper. A realization that they had walked into something far bigger than they were prepared for. One officer's lips trembled as he whispered, "No, this can't be happening." The father glanced at his watch. 5, 4, 3. A sharp command cut through the air. "All units, fall back, now." It was an order from higher up, much higher up. Within seconds, the officers scrambled back to their vehicles, their previous aggression replaced by sheer panic. Car doors slammed, engines roared to life, and one by one they retreated. The father chuckled as he watched them flee. The young woman grinned. "Well, that was fun." The young man beside her shook his head, muttering, "They really thought they had us." The father exhaled, the humor fading slightly. "They were just pawns," he said. "The real question is, who sent them?" Because this wasn't just about racial profiling. This wasn't just another case of mistaken identity. This was something else entirely, and whoever was behind it had just made a grave miscalculation. Because this family wasn't just any family, they were something far more dangerous. And now, they were being hunted. Few minutes after, the officers fled, their tires screeching as they scrambled to escape the mess they had just created. But the damage was done. The family under the oak tree sat in silence, their picnic long forgotten. The air was thick, the weight of unspoken thoughts pressing down on them. This wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The father, standing tall in his tactical jacket, scanned the park with sharp, calculating eyes. His children, grown, battle-worn in their early 20s, exchanged looks. They had seen this before. The game, the setup, and the real players lurking in the shadows. The young woman, arms crossed, smirked. They were scared. "Not of us," the eldest son muttered. "Of whoever's pulling the strings." The father nodded slowly. He already knew, and that was the problem. A single black SUV rolled up near the edge of the park. Slow, deliberate, no sirens, no markings, just tinted windows and an ominous presence. The father exhaled. "Right on time." The young woman's smirk vanished. The youngest son tensed. The driver's door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped out. Sunglasses, earpiece, stone-faced. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here because the situation had spiraled beyond local law enforcement. Another door opened. A second man stepped out, then a third. The father barely reacted. "You want to tell us why they sent foot soldiers after us?" the father asked, his voice smooth, controlled. "Or should we pretend this was just an honest mistake?" The lead agent removed his sunglasses, revealing cold, unreadable eyes. He didn't smile, didn't blink. "We need to talk." The father's smirk was barely there. "That's unfortunate, because we don't." The agent didn't flinch. "You know why we're here." The eldest son stepped forward. "What we know is that your people sent a squad of undertrained officers to make a move they didn't understand. And now, you're here to clean it up." The agent's jaw tightened. He turned back to the father. We both know this wasn't a random dispatch. The father's stare was piercing. Tell me something I don't know. The agent hesitated for a fraction of a second. We didn't send them. Silence. The young woman's head tilted. Oh, now it's getting good. The father was unfazed. Then who did? The agent's lips barely moved. You already know the answer. A slow breath, a shift in the energy. The father nodded, as if he had just confirmed something that had been lingering in his mind. You need to leave, the agent said, his voice lower. Now. The father gave a dry chuckle. You think they'll stop if I run? They won't, the agent admitted. But you'll have the advantage. The father turned slightly to his children, the weight of the moment settling over them. Pack up, he said simply. They didn't ask questions. They didn't argue. They moved. The agent watched, his face unreadable. We never had this conversation. The father turned back to him. You'll regret saying that. The agent swallowed but held his ground. You don't want to be here when the next wave comes. The father nodded once. Message received. And just like that, the black SUV pulled away, disappearing into the city. But the feeling in the air was different now. This wasn't just an encounter, it was a warning. And whoever had sent the cops after them was still watching. 3 hours later. The family moved fast, loading up their black Range Rover and disappearing onto the highway. They had safe houses, multiple, spread across different states. They weren't ordinary. They had lived through this before. The eldest son checked the mirrors. We're being followed. The father nodded, already aware. A dark sedan, no plates, perfect distance, professional. We lose him? The youngest son asked. The father exhaled. No. He gripped the wheel tighter, making a sharp turn onto an empty road. The sedan followed. Another turn, still there. The young woman sighed. Guess we're doing this now. The father glanced at the dashboard clock. They won't make a move until we're isolated. Then let's not give them the chance, the eldest son said. The father pressed the gas. The SUV surged forward. The sedan responded immediately. They wanted this chase, but they had no idea who they were chasing. The road stretched ahead, dark, endless, cutting through an abandoned industrial district. It was time to end it. The father's voice was calm. Buckle up. He jerked the wheel, spinning the SUV in a full 180-degree turn, tires screaming against the pavement. Face to face with the sedan. The sedan slammed its brakes. Too late. The father's foot hit the gas, full speed. The sedan tried to reverse, tried to escape, but the SUV was already there. Metal crunched, glass shattered. Silence. Smoke curled from the wreckage. The father stepped out. No hesitation, no fear. The young woman followed, gun drawn. The eldest son flanked the other side. They approached the crushed sedan, the driver inside barely moving, his face bloodied, his body limp. But his eyes were sharp, watching, calculating. The father yanked the door open. Who sent you? No answer, just a slow, eerie smirk. The young woman's grip tightened on her gun. We can do this the hard way. The man chuckled, choking on his own blood. You think this ends here? The father's eyes darkened. No. The man's smirk widened. Then you already know. You can't stop what's coming. A low beep. The father's gaze snapped down. A phone. A live feed. Someone was watching. Someone powerful. The father exhaled, his jaw tightening. He reached down, grabbing the phone, flipping the screen toward him. A single message appeared. You're out of time. Then, boom. The explosion ripped through the night, flames bursting into the sky. The shockwave sent the father flying backward, his vision flashing white. The heat seared through his jacket, the sound ringing in his ears. Smoke. Screams. Silence. Then, footsteps. Heavy. Calculated. Someone approaching through the flames. The father blinked, his vision sharpening just in time to see the shadow emerging. Not a cop, not an agent, something worse, the true enemy. And he had just made his first move.